Well, good afternoon and welcome to this session on the Architecture Drawing Prize. And I'm going to kick off by asking Ken Shuttleworth from Make Architects, who invented this prize, just to say a word about how it came about and what it's intended to do. Ken.
Thanks, Paul. I think the most important thing as an architect is drawing. And for me, drawing is about communication of ideas through to things that happen on site. So drawing, for me, has always been the most important thing about being an architect. My fear was it was getting lost. The skill of hand drawing was getting lost and getting forgotten about because of the computer age. And so we wanted to try and encourage both hand drawing, but also to recognize the computers are also producing amazing drawings as well. So that's why we have the three categories. But for me, the drawing prize is absolutely fundamental to how you do architecture, how the architects communicate, and how we actually feel to design buildings through drawing. Thanks,
I should say also on the panel, we've got two of the category winners with us. The first over there next to Ken is Eldri Infante from Philippines. Next to him is one of our indefatigable judges of this prize, Lily Jencks, landscape architect and teacher. On my immediate right is another category winner, Eugene from Singapore. And I'm Paul Finch, Programme Director of the World Architecture Festival. And I chair the Architectural Drawing Prize, which is sort of one of those fringe things that we do before the event takes place. So we celebrate, well, in this instance, two of our three category winners today. I'm just going to run through the shortlisted entries. There aren't too many of them, and it's a significant shortlist because one of our partners in the Drawing Prize is the Sir John Soane Museum in London, and there'll be an exhibition of the Drawing Prize winners starting at the end of January next year, which is on for a couple of months, which will be great for the architects. We're privileged to be exhibited at the Soane Museum. So all the images that you're going to see will be on display there. We're going to kick off with the digital category. And the first winner was a student from Hong Kong Poly, a transcultural journey on the Orient Express. I mean, it's very difficult with this screen to do this justice because this is a very, very long, single kind of journey story, kind of almost like a comic strip, but extending several meters, which the Soane Museum are going to have fun displaying when they open their exhibition next year. Lily, did you have any thoughts on this one?
I mean, always in these drawings, one of the challenges is how to show time and occupation and duration, and the kind of comic strip aesthetic we've seen a few times, and as Paul says, it's a shame you can't zoom in because there's a lot of layers to this drawing, a lot of details, both kind of the internal experience of the Orient Express train and then the journey that it passes through. It's incredible control of color and a joyful drawing when you zoom in.
The student involved is Long Yin Brian Cam, and there's a sort of, for the technically minded, it was produced, I think, in Rhino and Adobe. This next one, there were two shortlisted by AA students. This one by Ziad Haddad, the bucolic palimpsest. The project aims to explore our relationship with nature and our agency within the countryside, driven by the reutilisation of rural infrastructure sites in England. It's a digital Photoshop bricolage of different building scales and narratives, including an abandoned coal power station. We thought this was a pretty impressive thing. Ken?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's amazing is to actually, from that collection, actually create a single image. that actually works overall as one drawing. And also the depth this drawing achieves, I think, is fantastic to actually really sucks you into that perspective, which makes you feel like you're getting involved with the images. So I think it's a very exceptional drawing.
This by another AA student, Tom Chan, and this is envisaging a sort of future gallery experience in an AI world, and it's partly based on London's National Gallery, but which is in Trafalgar Square, hence the image of Nelson's column in the middle of that sort of digital formation at the back. And I think the Soane Museum liked this one partly because the National Gallery is celebrating, I think it's its 200th anniversary next year. So there's going to be a lot of fuss about that institution, and the Soane Museum will no doubt be contributing something of its own. I've got a feeling they've got a significant anniversary as well. Anyway, it's anniversary time, and that was one of the reasons this drawing was liked. It was rendered, by the way, in Blender, with Blender and Photoshop. And the category winner, Eugene Tan. And since you're here, Eugene, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, I think so this site here is actually Pedra Branca. So it's kind of a disputed island between Singapore and Malaysia. And I think that was how the whole project came about. So thinking about disputed islands and what is being done on it. So it came as a bit of a reflection because this is such an important island to Singapore's history, and to also understand, but it was so far away, and as members of the public, you can't access the island. So it became this whole question on how do we think about the future of these islands. I think I reflected a lot about looking at this island as a space on the map and looking at it as a shape instead of understanding the spaces involved on the island. And so I started to explore the project from that point of view. So how do we think about sites that are so far away, and how do we try to imagine a different way of representing these islands, to think about design on it, as well as to think about inhabiting these islands that are so far away. And I think that's how the circular composition came about. So the representation of this island was meant to talk about more than what it was, but also like the time, the seasons that were involved in it. And I think one of the fun things was making all these elevation drawings that surrounded the perimeter of the drawing, to talk about how we understand, how do we actually imagine ourselves being on the side. I kind of imagine this drawing as laid flat, and so you get to stand in one point and imagine what the elevation would be in front of you, and you can walk around the drawing to then really try to inhabit this site. Yeah.
And what did you use to generate?
So I used a lot of, for designing it, I used Rhino, and then after that I used Illustrator, and then touched it up again in Photoshop, so a bit of everything.
Lily?
Right.
Yeah, one of the things, again, coming back to my previous comment, is the idea of time and duration in the project. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about that. But, you know, we talk in the jury quite a lot about what makes a drawing an architectural drawing rather than an art drawing. And it's the kind of constructed nature of it that uses and plays with the conventions of architectural representation. So you've talked about that unfolded elevation. It's also, as I understand it, it's like a clock through time. So I just didn't notice this, but these are the dates on here, on the elevations. And then the whole is a calendar year circling through it. And you've added the drama of nature as well. There's an incredible storm, water, foam. I don't know if it's pollution or if it's just the sea foam. So you talk a little bit about both time and also the kind of influence of kind of drama, nature drama.
Yeah, so I think, like I mentioned earlier, this site is protected, so you can't really go to the site. So a lot of the research was done from archival material and scientific research, scientific studies that have been done on the island. So in particular, all like these reflected ecological elements were actually studied upon. So they were actual inhabitants of the site. And I was trying to figure out how do I represent all these things. So created some scale models to talk about the tidal sequences. So because it's an island in the middle of the ocean, there isn't actually its relationship with the sea is very temporal. In one day, the waves will cycle between -1 and to 2 meters above the datum point. And how do we talk about this island? How do we talk about that? I try to reflect it with the different layers of layering, to layer different layers of water over it. And so to create this idea of depth where at the center it's actually less dense than the surrounding. And to use that idea of digital medium, I think it was meant to be a PNG, so you're supposed to see the different layers of the drawing, and to try to understand that level of depth is to communicate across that nature of temporality. Again, with the time, I think the circular element talks about it. There are like 12 months in the year, and 4 of those months in Singapore are actually 8 of those months are monsoon seasons. And I try to reflect that according to by bisecting this drawing into into 4 quadrants, and to talk about that idea of seasonality as well.
You also gave us some sort of explanatory drawings, almost build-up drawings to how you produced your final version.
Yes, I did. So I think it's currently...
it's on display. All the winning drawings are on display over there.
Yeah, so I think mainly I wanted to talk about the different ways to understand the space, and in particular with architecture, I think it was important to try to reflect that, to try to spatialize this site so that we can understand it and we can all imagine how do we design on this island. So in a certain way, I think that all those 6 companion drawings to this were supposed to allow a viewer to kind of think about the site not just as the shape on the map, but also to understand it as a place to be able to be visited, to be able to be designed for. And that was like the intention for this drawing.
Thank you very much for that, and congratulations. We're going to move on to the hand-drawn category. The first incredibly dramatic watercolour, really, drawing in watercolour on cold-pressed watercolour paper. And this is Charles Rennie Mackintosh's magnificent Glasgow School of Art building that burnt down in June 2018, taken from 3 viewpoints from the city outskirts of Glasgow, from Renfrew Street and from the entrance of the school itself. Obviously a very hard... Alan Dunlop is a Glaswegian architect and teacher. Ken, this is, I think, probably the most dramatic drawing we've ever seen in this competition, isn't it?
I think what's amazing about this drawing, you actually get the feeling you're really there. I mean, the actual, obviously it was a horrific fire. I think from photographs in newspapers, you don't really get the scale of it, which this drawing actually projects in an incredible way. I mean, it was a massive event, and I think the colours and the sort of drama of it is really coming through in these drawings. So, yeah, it's a fantastic drawing. As you say, one of the most dramatic ones I've ever had, I think.
And of course, it did raise that question, is it a drawing? Is it a painting? And we have long discussions in the jury room about this. We tend to be quite generous. I mean, we had an overall winner one year, which was basically a woven tapestry. And in the end, we asked our judge from the Soane Museum, well, could a woven tapestry be a drawing? And he was head of architecture, and his view was, well, yes, it could, because it was the nature of what was being shown, which was as significant as the medium, which in which case was actually a village plan in Bangladesh. Let's move on. So this is by Alexander Warnke, a student at Kaiserslautern, which is in Germany. And this is essentially about rock and wood. It's connected to its origin. This shows the qualities on which it's based. The wood, tall and light, and the rock, heavy and hard. And it's drawn in ink on rough paper. Lily?
Yeah, I love this. It's incredibly delicately well drawn. And we have 3 categories for the award. There's digital, we've been talking about, there's hand drawing, and then there's the hybrid. And what's, if you think about drawing by hand, obviously you're presented with a white piece of paper. When you're building a digital drawing, more often than not, you're extracting information from a digital model. So it's a process of editing and rendering. In hand drawing, it's always an additive process on top of the white space. And I think this is incredible control of the white space of a drawing that's really well done, as well as a beautiful representation of light through trees and a natural scene.
And Ken, we had quite a long discussion about this, didn't we? Because there was the hand-drawn is tough. We get more entries in the hand-drawn category than either digital or hybrid. But in the end, we thought that this was rather compelling.
I mean, I just think it encourages people to do more hand drawings. The fact we get more interest from hand drawing, I think, is fantastic. Because in a way, that's what we're trying to not lose, is that connection with the hand and with the pencil. And I think this drawing, as Lily says, it has this incredible feeling of depth that, trying to imagine that piece of paper is actually flat, I find quite tough, as we'll see from the next one as well. But that sort of feeling that you're breaking down the surface of the paper to actually suck you into it is one of the things about this particular category.
Well, let's have a look at the winner of the category. I think we're missing a drawing. Let's see if we can go back to that. So let's move on to the next category. Oh no, I beg your pardon. This is another hand-drawn. It's not the winner. Sorry, my confusion. This is an intriguing drawing, a sort of up view of one of Christopher Wren's greatest, if not his greatest, church in the City of London since Stephen Walbrook. And the judges, I have to say, had some reservations about annotations which have been done in ye historic scripts. However, the skill of the drawing in representing what is a very complex building form with quite different angles for windows was pretty compelling. Ken?
I mean, it reminds me of some of Jim Sterling's drawings, those sort of, worm's eye views in axonometric looking up. What's interesting about this is actually the structure of the building is actually deleted. So you're looking at the inside, when it actually hits what the building is made out of, it stops and becomes white. And I think that's quite intriguing in terms of actually just focusing on the actual interior space and trying to display the interior space as a volume and not get too tangled up with how it's actually put together. So I think it's a really interesting drawing. And yeah, I hate the left-hand writing at the top. I'd get rid of that if it was my drawing. But yeah, it's a fantastic drawing.
The student, by the way, was Luka Pajovic. And now I think we are going to move on to the category winner. A drawing by Ben Johnson, who's an artist, has entered this award frequently without winning it. This is a rather extraordinary piece of work. Lily?
Well, yeah, I mean, the incredible dedication to draw every single brick. And it really describes this church, is composed like this from the brick units. And when you see images of it, the experience of it, the thickness of the space and the kind of air within it that is just articulated by the units, it captures that perfectly. And it's a kind of incredible labor of love, right? It's an incredible hard graft of drawing each and every brick in this way. And we were kind of captivated by the way that this technique represents the building very well.
The church is by Grundtvig. It's in Copenhagen. And I don't know if Ben's counted everyone. It wouldn't surprise me. But apparently there are 6 million bricks that have been used in the course of construction. And this was partly a research project rather than simply drawing what he saw, because Ben Johnson, he acquired plans and elevations, and the first thing he did was to reconstruct the building as a digital model using AutoCAD and SketchUp, and then he used the model to establish the viewpoint for his hand drawing. So quite a complex process, and not, as it were, simply drawing from life. And again, this raises a question, especially in the world of AI, where this thing between pure anything counts anymore, or whether everything's elided. And I think that's a debate we're going to have in years to come. We might discuss in a minute. Well, let's move on to our last category, which is hybrid. The first shortlisted scheme, the Liverpool Capriccio, by a young architect, Foster and Partners, and quite lively. I mean, we know Liverpool. We know some of these colours are very kind of typical of the columns that you find there. Ken, you were at Foster and Partners for many years. Cut the mustard for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great drawing. I wouldn't say it's actually from the Foster Partners studio. I think it's actually from an individual who works there, to be absolutely honest. But because it's not one of their projects. But I think it's interesting to show, again, the sort of complexity of what's actually going on above and below ground, seeing what's going on in terms of the activities of Liverpool. It actually sort of, in a way, evokes a sort of flavour of Liverpool to me. And knowing it as I do, it's just it has that sort of energy that Liverpool has as a drawing. So I think it's fantastic.
Ken's making a point that it's an architect from Foster, not one of their professional sort of design studio, because the guy who heads the professional design studio is one of our judges. But this is an architect who just works as an architect, and his name is Tim Wheeler. For the technically minded, he used 3ds Max, Vray, Photoshop, plus hand-drawn elements. And he regards this as the Docklands now survive as a timestamp, recording stories that are obscured, but we still see the presence of. This is one of those fun, sort of kind of New Yorky, cartoony drawings with kind of lots of people doing indeterminate things, playing banjos and running for a train. Lily.
Well, it's very much a kind of cartoony history image of New York. I think obviously the street lights created by the taxis, which are being picked up so that the car lights illuminate the street, a kind of futuristic history. It was just a very fun whole image, very convincingly drawn, kind of tying the style into every detail.
And the student was Alexander Jong, and a bit of text here. Our proposal aims to flip the script. What if a destination becomes the active agent, filling the public space with a vibrantly interactive streetscape? And the medium was hand drawing on tablets, digital collage software, Rhino, and Adobe Photoshop. And the category winner we have here, Remembering the Sea Monster, Eldri John Infante. Welcome and congratulations. Tell us about your drawing.
Yeah, thank you very much to the jury and, of course, the rest of the Architecture Drawing Prize. So my drawing was actually, when I draw, it is a way of learning and observation. I'm a fan of architecture before I became an architect. So I really like studying buildings, and when I'm sketching, I feel like I'm conversing with the designer, with every detail that I create, with every material that I express. And for this particular structure, the Sea Monster is a public display they did in Weston-super-Mare in England back in 2022, and it has a very interesting story to it. It's the first oil rig from the North Sea to be transformed into something like this. They call it an inherited structure, and they're putting a case of how do we proceed into a more sustainable future by using creativity at that. So what I did was the top part of the drawing was actually the manual, and then all the bottom parts are frames of narratives. These are fractions of the story, in a way a timeline of the structure. So it's basically collaging, picking assets from the manual drawing and creating these frames about the history of being a oil rig, the construction, the map, the public perceptions, which are surprisingly varies. There are people who bashed it, there are people who really liked it, and then the rest are detailed on the legend at that. So the way of creating the image was actually drawn from the structure, which is piecing together from a certain asset, which is the sea monster. So they created that, and then the drawing is piecing a certain compositions, the frames of narratives from the manual drawing.
And you started off in ink on paper for your primary image, and then went into other methods for the others.
Yes, I actually scanned the drawing, and then right after that, I created all these images from either line or a collage, a fraction of the drawing.
Well, I think we love the kind of simultaneous simplicity and complexity of this. Lily?
Yeah, I mean, the techniques that you describe, the sequence of drawing, scanning, and then iterating digitally is kind of a great example of the use of hybrid drawing type. And the levels of abstraction in it I find really interesting. I mean, obviously there's a kind of cinematic strip to show this narrative concept, right? So that's the composition is working like that. But I love that it turns into this kind of digital iteration as well, like a stutter, and then it's abstracted into this almost like DNA dot point to it. So it's playing with these conventions of how we represent and how that layer of medium of representation adds to the narrative.
Thank you.
And Ken, it was a kind of rather nice to see a hybrid where actually the hand drawing was a kind of dominant element.
Yes, I mean, I think it is a very interesting use of just, doing a sort of pencil drawing or pen drawing to start with, and then using the computer in a way that I suppose it was designed to be used. This is actually taking the idea from a hand drawing. But I think what's interesting about this is actually it's talking about reuse, and reuse is a topic at the moment that we're all wrestling with. The carbon agenda is looking at reusing buildings rather than knocking them all down and starting again. So this, as an element where you take an oil rig and actually make it into something else, is part of the narrative I think that we're talking about at the moment. So it's highly relevant as a topic.
Yes, as it happens, there's a prize there's a future project prize going to a project which envisages the complete recycling of all the oil rigs in the North Sea by Arabs. So I think this thing about what do you do with a redundant oil rig is becoming quite a zeitgeisty topic. Well, thank you very much for that. I'd like to conclude just in the last 5 minutes. By asking each of our panelists how they think AI is going to affect drawing and the sort of drawings they produce, and do you welcome it or does it make you feel nervous? And I'm going to ask the two winners to kick off, and then the judges. So Eugene, why don't you tell us, are you using AI for drawings yet?
I think that as a tool, it is certainly a way of thinking, but it can't replace drawing entirely, because when you draw, you think about it, you break it down, you deconstruct the concept into different ways of thinking. And I mean, as a visualization tool, I think it's very, very powerful, but drawing still stays for me. Thank you. Eldry?
Yeah, same with Eugene. I think as a tool, it's very powerful. It has so much support for the designers, but as a person who has been trained since high school in manual drawing, also in college, our school really values hand-drawn presentation, and then I work on a firm that that hand drawing is a very vital part. So, and at the same time, drawing. When you see a drawing, you see the process, you see the strokes, you see the human that created it, and I think if we lose that warmth, then it will become dull and uninteresting for me.
Well, I think we've heard two fairly romantic views so far, because I'm sure Ken, give us a more cynical view about what's going to happen in a busy studio.
I mean, I think, I agree it's a tool. For me, it's definitely a tool, as is Chat GTP. There are things you can use to accelerate to what you're doing anyway. But, I mean, you're not going to get Midjourney to design a building for you, because it's basically just a series of words. and it's the art side of it, the actual hand side of it, working on paper, with a pencil, working through an idea. It's not the same as just talking into a computer, giving it 3 or 4 words to come up with an image. That's just not, it's not what it's about. So for me, I think it's a separate thing. We're still going to have people drawing by hand. I don't know, the prize will probably embrace AI next year in some form. We haven't yet determined what that actually is, but I think we need to be aware of what it's actually doing. But I do see it. We have to embrace this technology. These images that are coming out, we compete with architects all over the world, and some of the images that we compete against are phenomenal images, and we know they've been produced using a big dollop of AI. And I think we need to understand how to actually work that. So for us as architects, we're in a transitional period to actually understand what it can actually do and what it can't do, more importantly. But I don't think it's going to take away the ability of a person to design a building on paper, by hand, to come up with the right idea. You're not going to get that by just talking into a computer.
Thank you. Lily?
Yeah, I don't know yet that we know if it's a real step change to how we're working, because it could just be like any digital technology, the evolution of our technologies. Again, it's so fast at producing things that it stops us thinking, and that's the great thing about the slow sketch, right? It's a way of architects to think. So it proliferates images that can be a bit dumb, but also very seductive. And so I don't know yet. I feel a little bit, we have to see whether this technology can can change the profession in a more meaningful way, or whether it just is another tool for kind of speeding up the imagery that we still kind of need to balance with all the existing tools we have.
Well, let me conclude by saying that we were discussing whether we should have an AI category or whether we should allow AI, provided people said that they'd used AI in the production of drawings by hand or any other form. And we thought we better ask ChatGPT what it thought. So we explained our dilemma. And it took about 30 seconds for it to send us a beautifully composed 7-point kind of list of suggestions about how we could adapt AI in a very interesting way to our own design awards. And I think we were pretty knocked out by this. And I suppose the thing is, it may only be words, but it's a bit like Google, isn't it? I mean, except if you put more in, it'll cope even better. And I've got this feeling that we might end up saying, well, why don't we have an award for a really great diagram, which I think would be far more difficult for AI to deal with in terms of responding to program and site and client and history, rather than, as it were, possibly replicating for digital purposes in an intelligent and fast way. That's to come. It's why drawing's still fascinating. And on your behalf, can I thank all our panelists today for their contribution, and in particular, the category winners for great work. Thank you very much indeed.